May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. I wrote a joke for you this week. Why did Jesus cross the Sea of Galilee? To get to the other side, yes. I'm not sure how irreverent that is to include Jesus or to line Jesus up with chicken jokes, but to get to the other side. That phrase, I'm not sure it really struck me before this year. Jesus is sitting in the boat. He had asked the disciples to prepare the boat for him 2 chapters ago because the crowds were getting big. And so they had prepared a boat for him. He started teaching, and the crowds had gotten so large that he got into the boat to teach. And so the crowds are here on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus is just rocking back and forth nice and gently in the boat and telling his parables and teaching. Been a long day, and he looks to his disciples at the end. I guess the crowds were still pretty solid on the shore, and he says, let's go to the other side. And so the fishermen whose boats they're in, these are people who are used to being on the Sea of Galilee, and they yes, Jocelyn, they hoist the sail. Vestry, reading this passage earlier this week, she goes, well, didn't they have sails? And I'm going, I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that. Yes, they had the basic sailing boat, fishing boat, had the oars, but also the sail. And they start to the other side, which is a different journey for these fishermen. Now, I'm going to draw you a map. Here's the Sea of Galilee. I'm behind the map. You're looking at it here. So on the west side, is Israel. But on the east side is not Israel. And Jesus is over here in Capernaum, and they take the boat. It's about 5 or 6 miles across. You can see the other side, but it's not our Great Lakes, but it's big. Going over to, not Israel, to Gentile territory, to the place where the unclean people live. And to make it even really sharper image, the gospel writer here makes sure that we know when he gets there, he's met by a man who's filled with demons, who's running around naked, cutting himself. So there's blood, there's nakedness, there's Gentile, there's demons. He's running around in the graveyard. You don't stay clean by going in the graveyard. And when he's cast out, when the demons are cast out of this man over there, they go into the herd of pigs. Now, you don't have pig herding in Israel. They didn't enjoy their bacon too much. So the gospel writer makes sure that you know how foreign this other side over here is. We skip that story next week. Next week, when we get back to the lectionary, Jesus is already coming back across the Sea of Galilee. So we never really, in this year's readings, stay with Jesus in this other side. But he's taken the disciples there. Not content to let them stay comfortable in their home territory of Galilee, with people they know, where things happen the way they expect them to happen. Even if the Romans are basically in charge, they still know this is their home. Jesus is taking them on an unexpected journey. Let's go to the other side. And it says they took him just as he was, off in the boat. Jesus falls asleep. Now, there are some preachers who claim that this passage is the justification for most preachers' Sunday afternoon nap. Jesus has been teaching all morning, and now he's going to take his nap in the boat. And the wind comes up, and the storm rages. And the fishermen who spend day after day after day on this sea are terrified. They know what's going on. They know enough to be really frightened, which tells you how big the storm is. The water is washing over the sides of the boat. And Jesus is snoring. He is just calmly in the stern of the boat, sound asleep. Teacher, don't you care that we are perishing? Teacher. He's not a fisherman. He's not a boats person, but boy, we need bailing. Need somebody while we're struggling with the wind and the waves, all hands on deck. Don't you care that we are perishing? Here's a bucket. And Jesus helps the sleep out of his eyes and looks at them and looks at the sea and rebukes it. The language used here is the exact same language as gospel writer uses a couple of chapters before when Jesus rebukes an evil spirit and then tells it to be still or silent. Same language. He rebukes the sea, the wind, and tells the sea, peace, be still. And the sails just just hanging there. There's nothing happening. Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Peace, be still. And Jesus looks at the disciples and says, why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? Who is this? I'm not sure which moment's the more terrifying. To have the storm beating around you, or to be in the boat with someone with that kind of power, that kind of authority. Are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? Who is this? As we journey with Jesus, because this is a story about Jesus and his disciples. He's not with the big crowds here. These are those who are willing to journey with him. We're going to be asked to go to the other side. God is going to call us to go to places that we might not normally inhabit. Jesus isn't content just with the coffee shop where you know what they're pouring, and you know they'll give you the Wi-Fi code, and everything is going to happen the way you want it to. They're not. Jesus and God is not content with just letting us stay in our own area. But it's going to call us to unknown places, to be with people who might frighten us. And our journeys in our life are not always going to be easy. Paul, the Apostle Paul, writing today's Corinthians lessons, he's bearing witness to the fact that storms kept coming. Paul talks about his ministry through great endurance in afflictions, hardships, calamities, beatings, imprisonments, riots, labors, sleepless nights. And he didn't even put shipwreck in there, but Paul was shipwrecked too. He was on the Mediterranean with a storm, and the boat was swamped, and the boat went down. Paul was in the waves for 2 days. Lord, do you not care that we are perishing? Because we journey with Jesus does not mean that the storms won't come up around us. Despite what some TV evangelists might say, if you pray the right way, it doesn't mean that the money's going to come, the illness is going to be healed, the house isn't going to be foreclosed, or whatever the issue, the storms that face us, they still come on. I don't know who said it first, but it has stuck with me. Courage is fear that has said its prayers. Courage is fear that has said its prayers. Who is this that we've called upon? You hear what they called Jesus? Teacher. They weren't expecting a lot. Teacher, do you care that we're perishing? I'm sorry, you're a teacher. I wouldn't call on you to still the storm. Teacher, do you care that we're perishing? And they end up, who is this who is in this boat with us? Courage is fear that has said its prayers, that has called out. It does not mean that the storms won't come. And it does not mean that the one we call to will always still the storm. But do we have the faith to call out and to know that God is journeying with us? Jesus himself, it's not just Paul, Jesus himself in his journey is going to face fearful things. He's going to be betrayed, beaten, imprisoned. He's going to face the cross and death. Father, if there is any way this can be taken from me, Father, do you care that I am perishing? Courage is fear that has said its prayers. And into that, for Jesus comes peace. And the question that this gospel writer continues to ask us, no matter where we're journeying, whether we're home in Galilee or we're way on the other side, whether we're adrift at sea in a boat that's being swamped or the sun is shining, the gospel writer continues to raise this question of what do we do with our fear? Ends the entire gospel that way. The women come to the empty tomb, and this gospel has them, the very ending of this gospel, has them running away and saying nothing to anyone because they're afraid. It's the big question of this gospel. What do we do with our fear? Are you afraid? Have you still no faith? So I want the answer to be that it always calms a storm. I sat with a young mother a week ago as she talked to me about her diagnosis of very serious cancer. Their children, not even teenagers. And I want to be able to tell her that in the midst of the storm, God is going to just still the sea. But what we are given is that in the midst of the storms, God is there with us. I want to tell a church that struggles with dwindling numbers, challenged budgets. Are you afraid? Have you still no faith? And death may come. But having said our prayers in the midst of our fear means that we have claimed that resurrection. We know that new life. Were you there when I set the bounds of the universe? God asked Job. Do you know the depth and do you know the measurement of it all? I do, God says. And that's not a whole lot of answer for Job to the kinds of answers that we want to demand of God. But it is an answer to who is this that we call to. It is an answer to who is this who promises to be our shepherd, to never leave us alone. Lo, I will be with you to the ends of the ages. So Galilee or the other side, storms on land or sea, imprisonment, torture, hunger, travail, our fears maybe sometimes feel like they have no bounds. But we have a God of the boundless, of the ends of the universe. Who is this? Who is with us? Who is it that we call to? Who is it that answers?